I would hold off on troubleshooting that if you can.
So the
For
critical point here is to make sure that the billing accounts are linked.
mhm.
We can go back and
Sorry, the billing accounts should already be linked. People need to create their billing project.
thank you for correcting. That's a
Yeah,
very
it's
critical thing to get right.
yeah.
Could we run through that
Mhm.
in a directed manner, Ali?
Yes, yes.
And just to provide additional background, we want to make sure that the Terra accounts that you, the participants, are using right now fall under the Jamboree umbrella so that the small charges that you incur while performing the exercises with Ali today and Anton tomorrow don't end up don't require you to pay a bill.
That's
This
right.
way, we make sure that the bill goes straight to us so that you can focus on learning the platform.
Right.
Hey, Mo and Ali, I just wanted to quickly bring something up. Heading into the next part of this, I just wanted to make sure that the two of you have a chance to tell participants that if we run into major issues with the technical platform, we do have a fallback exercise that is a walkthrough demonstration while we figure out what's happening. So would you like to just talk about that briefly so people know what happens if we run into a major error situation?
Oh, so I think how I would phrase it is I'm going to do a walkthrough, but you, the participants, have all the tools to catch up and do the walkthrough. Repeat what I do in my walkthrough on your own time. So if you have a hard time, if your billing doesn't catch up, or if something seems to be taking a long time, my suggestion would be to follow along as I walk through, and then you'll be able to do everything on your own time. Is that what?
That's exactly right. And I
Right.
just want to add to that that Mo and me and anyone on the Anvil training and outreach side is just an email or a Slack message away, so
That's
that
right.
even if it's after 4 p.m. tomorrow, next week, next year, we can help you walk through this.
And we have a lot of resources that are included in the slides that are intended to be self-serve. They'll let you watch. We have some videos, we have tutorial workspaces that are very much follow along and that will get you familiar with the basics so that you can get started on your own. So I'm going to walk through the billing part, setting up the billing project again. If you click on that top, from any page in Terra, if you click on those top three horizontal bars, click on your name and click on billing. Your billing, initially the billing projects that you have access to will be none. So yours will look like just the very top portion of the screen. And when you click the plus sign, if you are included in a billing account, it will show up in this drop-down menu. And the one for the Jamboree will look like this. It'll say nih.nhgri.magic.jamboree 2020-06. And the webinar participants have all been added to this billing account in the Google Cloud Platform. So this should be exactly what you see when you click on that little plus sign. And in order to copy a workspace or work in a or create a workspace from scratch, you need to first create a billing project. So you would call it something, name it something that makes sense to you, and then click. And then I'm not sure.
While you're typing, Ali, I'll
Yeah.
interject that a couple of folks reported errors when they went through this process. When
Okay.
you create a billing project on Terra, the name has to be completely unique and not just unique to your account. So if you could add in numbers to represent dates and initials, that would help your billing project name be
That's
unique.
right. Everyone's under the same Google billing account. So any one of all of the billing projects that are going to fall under this billing account have to be unique names. So if you're using something like Jamboree 2020 and another person tries to use it, it won't let you create it. You're absolutely right. So that could be some of the errors that people are having. So just add your initials and the date or something in order to make it unique. And then once you enter the name and you just click on the Create Billing Project. I'm going to cancel this one. So should I, where are we at?
So I would go through your exercise of going through that workspace at this point.
Okay. Okay. So we're transitioning now to session 5. Yes?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Okay, I do have a few slides, but I think in the interest of time, I'd rather just do walkthrough. And the slides will be accessible to everyone. They have resources, but I think Andrew covered a lot of the basics on what is available in terms of Anvil data, and I'd rather spend the 21 minutes we have remaining just looking at the workspace. So once you've created your billing project and you've made a copy of the workspace that I mentioned, you will want to be in it. And I have to search for mine again, so so this is the one I just made. Nope. That is it, but it does not have a dashboard. Okay. I will work on the dashboard and send that to you. Basically, this is a public access workspace that will look somewhat familiar to what you can anticipate an Anvil workspace will look like. If you look under data, it has generally 3 data tables. The participant table is phenotypic data, so this one is pretty long. It has many columns with different phenotype data, LDL values, population, height, HDL, annotated sex. Pardon me. Then in the sample table is where you will find genotypic data. And I went over this in my session 2. Here's the sample ID and some additional information. And if you look in the column that's titled CRAM path, these are all links to genomic data in a workspace, in a public bucket. And I'm hoping this is a public bucket, but it might not be. If it's not, I will fix it after the workspace. Anyway, this is what you can expect your data tables to look like. The last table is a sample set, and it's just a compilation of all of the samples. Or, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to show 2 things in this walkthrough. I'm going to show how to get phenotypic data into a notebook, and hopefully I will have time. I'm going to show how to run a quick workflow. So the first thing to do is to open the Notebooks tab. There are 2 notebooks included. The first one is the actual analysis template notebook, and the second notebook is just a list of commands and libraries and packages. So in order to run a notebook in Terra, you will just click on the link, and all of the webinar attendees these are going to be brand new notebook runtime, so yours are probably going to take a few minutes to spin up. What happens when you click on the link for a notebook is you're given a choice of working in edit mode or in playground mode. I'm going to work in edit mode, so you can. And what's going to happen is Terra is reaching out to the cloud and spinning up a virtual machine on your behalf. And the virtual machine is unique to you, and it's unique to this workspace. And you can control how much, what the environment is and how much compute power it is. With, if you look at the gear icon right here, you see that I'm using the default environment, and there are some other environments with different libraries, and I'm using the default compute power, which has 4 CPUs, each with 15 gigabytes of memory and 50 gigabytes of disk size. And it costs about 20 cents an hour. And Anton's going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow. But mine should spin up pretty quickly because I was running it earlier. While it's spinning up, you'll get a preview of the notebook. This is a very basic notebook because my intent is just to give you, just to show you what it looks like to import the phenotypic data that's in the data tab, inside the participant tab of the data table into a notebook environment, and we'll do a little bit of plotting to show that it's actually there. And then the idea is after importing the data from the workspace table into a Pandas data frame in the cloud, you could then use a notebook to run an analysis, a preliminary exploration analysis on it. So notebooks can be written in Python or in R, and those would be the languages that of the commands that you execute. And any analysis that you can write in R or in Python, you can do interactively in a notebook. And when you get this view, that means that your runtime, your notebook runtime, is running in the cloud. So I have a dedicated virtual machine that's doing my bidding as I run through the notebook. So this is a very short notebook. The nice thing about notebooks is they allow you to include documentation and code. I'm going to run through very quickly on this notebook. It's pretty simple, and you can follow along, and then when you have your project running, you can go through and run it on your own. And Anton is going to cover a more robust notebook tomorrow in his presentation. So if you haven't used a notebook before, couple things to note. Each piece is called a cell, and they're either markdown or code. You can read the markdown, and you can page through. There should be enough information that the idea is to give enough documentation so that someone else, if you pass the notebook to someone else, they will understand what you are doing in each step. And you notice that in the sidebar, you see the table of contents right here, and you can click ahead if you need to. So this is the notebook setup. You need to set any runtime values. I talked about the notebook, the VM runtime right here. If you need more computational space, you need to set that up before doing any calculations or analysis. This one just uses the defaults, so we're all set. Second is the kernel type. You can look right up here. Terra should recognize what kernel your notebook requires, but sometimes it gets confused or it has a little bit of a blip, and you can change that by going under this menu. So check that. The next step is to load any additional packages that you need in order to do the analysis. These are the packages we're going to load for this section. And what this does is include those packages in the notebook runtime. it's a lot like when you get a computer home from Best Buy or wherever you're gonna load Microsoft Word on it or Excel or whatever you would normally use. Now mine ran pretty quickly because I've already loaded that onto this runtime. Loading packages is something you only have to do once. The first time that you set up and run your virtual machine, as long as you don't delete that runtime, they will always be there. So the next step is to load the phenotypic data, and we're going to use a package of Python code that was developed by the Broad that inputs data that's in the workspace data table into the notebook environment. So things that are in the data tables are not actually in the computational environment. And this is the section where the notebook is going to reach out to the data table and take that information and bring it into the notebook environment. So the first thing to do, I'm going to expand this to show all the code, is to get these are the Google Billing Project information. So here's the billing project. Here's the name of the workspace, and this is the workspace storage bucket that goes along with it. Next step is to load the phenotypic data. So it's going to use a function that's defined in a library to load the phenotypes from the workspace data table. So the first thing it's going to do is run the companion notebook. Remember I said there was a notebook, that Terra data util notebook, which defines some packages. So first it's going to run that, and then it's going to pull the data from the phenotypic data table, from the participants data table. And this should look pretty familiar. The participant ID is the first one. And then these are all the phenotypic data that was in that table that I showed you. And you can check if you want, if you had a separate tab open in the workspace in the browser, you could check in the data table and you could verify that these are actually the things that are in that data table. So here's a little note about if you get an error, hopefully you won't. So this just modifies the data table. And in this, I'm just going to very quickly show some plotting that you can do in a notebook. So this again defines some functions to plot here. And I'm going to generate three kinds of plots. One's just a distribution plot, a bivariate distribution plot, so it plots two continuous variables against each other, and then a box plot. I will say that the data in this workspace is downsampled, so it would run quickly. There's only 100 participants, so as you'll see in these plots, it doesn't look as great as you would expect if you had a lot of participants. So here I'm gonna plot the variable LDL, and it looks more or less like you would expect. And here we have another plot of BMI, and again it follows a Gaussian curve like you would expect. I'm going to run down and do a quick bivariate distribution. This is BMI and height. And again, not a lot of participants in this sample. And HDL and height, and kind of looks like you would expect. And last one is box plot. So I know I ran through that really quickly. Anton is going to cover a expanded version of this tomorrow in his demo. So I just wanted to quickly show you a sample of plotting that you can do. How is everyone feeling? I'm going to close up the notebook. It might,
Folks could react on Slack to whether they're caught up or not. It'd be
yeah,
great to get a quick poll.
yeah. And again, if you're not caught up, you can do most of this on your own. Notebooks are pretty self-instructive.
It looks like a few folks are caught up. Let's go ahead and open it up for questions. Here, if folks have errors that don't make sense to them, please feel free to bring them up. So the question for Ali, does closing the notebook free the resources?
That's a great question. So closing the notebook does it, it it does mean that the cost per time when it's running, you will no longer be accruing that cost per time. When you close it but don't delete the runtime, any generated data is still kept in the notebook runtime, but you are not accruing costs. Does that answer the question? I can also mention, you can imagine if you have a particular, like if you boost the resources on your notebook because you're dealing with a very large set of data, for example, the per hour charges can be quite large, and you might be concerned about what happens if I walk away and leave things running and forget about it. And Terra does have some controls in place. If no activity is happening in your notebook runtime for, I believe the cutoff is 30 minutes, the notebook will stop running. It won't delete, but it will stop running, which means that it won't be accruing charges. Pardon me. However, if the virtual machine that's running the notebook is active, if it's running some calculations in the background, it will not pause the runtime. So it does exactly the behavior that you would want. If you're not doing anything and it's idle for a while, it will stop so you don't get any charges. If it's a long running calculation and you do want it to continue even when you're not sitting there at the screen, it will do that. Does that help?
Hi, it's Uday here from NYGC. I have a technical question. I don't know if this is within the scope of this exercise, but I was wondering about these methods. For example, there is the get Terra table to data frame method that's in the notebook, and is that like where is that method being defined, and is there documentation how to go about finding those methods?
Can you tell me where?
Yeah, so this is 3 point section 3.2 under load phenotype data.
Right. You're asking about,
Right, that's exactly, yeah. So that method is pulling a bunch of information and creating a data frame out of it.
right.
I was wondering.
So that's actually in the notebook. The Terra data util notebook it defines a bunch of functions in Python, and that notebook is in this workspace. I believe it is pretty well documented, so you'll be able to see how those are defined. Are you asking if is that resource available in general? Is that
No, I think I have the answer. Okay, I wasn't really sure where that method was being
right?
defined and
Yeah,
how was it
it's
being
in
pulled, but
right.
okay, I
It's
have
in
it.
that
Thank you.
it's in that notebook. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, Ali, I'm seeing some comments in the chat here about some people getting issues with the get Terra table to DF function. and that it's not defined. Do you have any
Okay,
idea?
so that means that it hasn't run the notebook. Are they in, if you're in 3.2, so what I would suggest is clearing the data behind ahead. So if you go under cell and go to clear all output, and then again under cell, go run all above, and it should, yeah, I would try rerunning this part about the companion notebook, and then the pull the phenotypic data, because it's not finding a command that's defined in that notebook.
Yeah, Mike Schatz in the GSP Jamboree is saying that he was able to fix this problem by going into the Terra data util notebook and running all the cells in there, then switching
That,
back.
yes, that also works. Yeah, that works as well.
Okay. Thanks for confirming.